Hola a todos, привет всем. Salut tout le monde. Salut tout le monde. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to this video. In this video, I would like to talk about factors of being a successful language learner for me, in my opinion, and in my experience learning different languages growing up and in the past 3 years. So, if you don't know me, I grew up speaking 5 different languages, 3 of which I learned in school because our school teaches them, and you cannot graduate high school without learning all 3. And then the other 2, I simply learned at home. Actually, one of them I learned passively or more naturally. That is to say, my parents did not actively try to teach me this language, but because I was exposed to it a lot, I picked up words, I picked up phrases, and I started using them. So I would probably make another video going deep into that, or maybe I would explain some of them as I go along on my list of what makes a successful language learner, in my opinion. And then the last 3 years, I learned Portuguese, Russian, and this year, 2023, I'm starting French as well. So, like I said, what are the factors that make a successful language learner for me? So first would be having a sense of wonder and curiosity and interest in languages and cultures, because if a person is not interested in a topic or something that they would like to do, I don't think anyone would be successful. The reason why people are successful in the things that they do is that they enjoy doing it. I understand, like, for other people, learning languages isn't a thing. I mean, it doesn't make them happy, it stresses them out. So that is, they would probably not be successful. So a successful language learner must be interested in languages and cultures and being curious about it. So the next one would be having a positive experience with languages and having having positive experience with language learning, and the reward and positive reinforcement of being able to speak another language. So my story comes in this part. So I grew up learning Mandarin and English first in nursery and in preschool, and in elementary and high school, from elementary to high school. Our school had English, Mandarin, and Filipino. So these 3 languages I grew up learning in school. So we would have classes in these 3 languages every day. So basically exposure every day. And our classes, which I think is very effective here, and I'm surprised that they don't do it in the US, is that a language class is taught in the target language. When we have English, our teacher would speak in English, we would have to respond in English. Our notes would all be in English. Filipino classes, the same. The teacher enters the room, we greets us in Filipino, we reply in Filipino, and we speak in Filipino. This is probably the most relaxed class, I think, of all the classes, because students tend to speak Filipino with each other. So we also have this thing in school that if it's an English class, you have to speak in English with each other, and if you don't, you get fined 1 peso or something. And in Chinese classes, which we had two of, we teacher also enters the classroom, greets us in Chinese, we reply in Chinese, and although we don't speak with each other in Mandarin, um, but the teacher, Laosher would always, whoever the Laosher is, would be discussing the topic, which most of the time would be stories, poems, literary things from Confucius, etc. And the class would be in Mandarin. So that's the three languages that I studied in school, learned in school, and got to expose that and got exposed to in school as well. Um, English is the easiest because all the media, cartoons, everything is in English here. So that's where I got more of my exposure. Um, and that made me very comfortable in speaking English as well. Now, the other two languages, purely at home, Hokkien is a Fujianese Chinese language, the language of my family, my ancestors, and my parents actively taught me that language. I would hear them speak it. They would teach me what this word means, and then I would repeat it back to them. Very much like how people would learn their native language at home. I would assume if a person was an immigrant to a different country. So pretty much that's how my parents taught me Hokkien. Now, I realized, interesting enough, that with Cebuano, my parents never taught me, like deliberately taught me. I think it wouldn't have mattered if I could speak it today or not, considering I grew up in Manila. But I spent enough time in Cebu to hear it from my cousins, people in Cebu, my family there, and I don't know exactly how it happened, but I picked it up and I can speak. So, through my story, my experience with languages, learning these languages, I do have, as you can see, as I'm telling you the story, I am excited about it. I'm happy about my achievements. I'm happy to be able to speak these languages. So there is my positive reinforcement. Another story that I may have shared in a different video years ago is because I speak Cebuano, and when we travel, most of the there are a lot of Filipinos around the world who work overseas, and a lot of them, not all, but some of them are okay. A lot of them are in hotels or in hospitals. Doctors, nurses, managers in hotels, or even the rest of the staff. So when it was interesting, because when we were in Iceland, we were trying to get. I think we needed something. We needed cash, I think. So we went to an Icelandic bank, and we had to withdraw cash. And we heard two women speaking in Cebuano, and we found two Cebuano speaking people in Iceland. So that was okay. So they worked there, and that was interesting, right? Who would think people from the Visayas region of the Philippines would be in Iceland, of all places, working there. And then another time we were in Austria. We were in a hotel, and then the housekeeping, just finished fixing our rooms when we got in. So when I opened the door, I heard two women again speaking Bisaya, Cebuano, and then I said something in Cebuano and said, "Are you done?" And I think it didn't register that I was a guest. Like they were surprised that someone from their country who could speak their specific language, because Filipino is the national language and English, but Cebuano is also spoken by a lot of people here. I think it's the second most spoken language in the Philippines after Filipino, of the Philippine languages. Um, so that's also a positive reinforcement. What else? I could speak Mandarin, so when we traveled, yeah, sometimes I hear other tourists, the and then they would have problems communicating in English, and sometimes I would help them. So that's also a positive reinforcement. And then years ago, again, when we were in Bhutan, climbing that hill or mountain, and it took me 4 hours to get up and 3 hours to come down. The Tiger's Nest is the place. You could check that out. It's very beautiful, but it is quite a hike up to the temple on the side of a cliff of a mountain. And then there were a couple of Brazilians. They asked me to take their photo, and then I chatted with them some. And at the time, I was definitely not B1 in Portuguese, but I spoke with them a little, and then I greeted them, bon dia, and then, yeah, basically another positive reinforcement, to be able to speak with other people in their language. They were surprised because how is this Asian person from the Philippines who was visiting Bhutan speaking to them? I mean, knowing how to greet them in Portuguese. So that is the second factor that I think makes a successful language learner. So having positive reinforcement. And then the third one comes with on the heels of having positive experiences and positive reinforcement would be to be able to be ego, like not to have ego with language learning, and willing to make mistakes and laugh at oneself. Because I remember growing up that sometimes the words I get tongue tied with the words, because in school we were learning we were learning English and Mandarin, and then before grade 1 we didn't have Filipino classes, so my Filipino exposure would only be from the people outside, and like at the malls, at the groceries. I don't speak it at home with my parents, so I did get tongue tied with Filipino at first, but my parents were very encouraging. It wasn't a big deal, because I think in a multilingual society like I grew up in, it's normal for kids to get confused, because you would be taught, like for example, you would be taught how to count to 10 in Hokkien, and then someone else would be speaking to you in Filipino, and others would be speaking to you in English, or the stuff that you watch on TV would be in English. So it's normal to get tongue-tied and mix in words. And as we develop, as we grow up into adulthood, you will be more conscious of the differences. Oh, this is this language, that language. This is English. This is in Filipino. This is in Mandarin. This is in Hokkien. This is in Cebuano. This is in Portuguese. This is in Russian. And you'll be able to recognize and not put everything in the same sentence. But that comes later on. But at the point that you are just starting, even with myself right now, when I haven't studied a new language in years, and then 3 years ago I started with Portuguese, and then last year with Russian, and this year in French. Sometimes I would be practicing French, but I would be hearing the Portuguese word because I'm more comfortable in Portuguese than in French. I've had more hours spent with Portuguese than French. So this happens, and sometimes you mix in words, you mix in phrases, and you pronounce it wrong. You have to be very forgiving. Like a successful language learner will be very forgiving at making mistakes, because you're learning a language that's not essentially not yours yet, until you get fluent at it, you know. And especially in my case, these three languages are not languages that I would hear outside on the streets randomly. These are languages far from the languages that I speak. No one, I don't know if there's but a population of Portuguese speaking people here in the Philippines. Of course there will be. I would I would be crazy to say that there aren't any, because my Mr. in Capoeira, he's Brazilian and he can speak, but it's not as it's not like I can just it's not like I'm in New York that I could just walk down the street and hear all different languages in yeah as I walk down the street. No. So I have to successful language learners have to be very flexible and, able to laugh at themselves and take themselves lightly, because again, they're still learning the language. And the fourth one here would be enjoying the process. Of course, if it's something that you're interested in and you have a positive experience in, and you enjoy a lot, you will enjoy the process a lot. Like if you enjoy talking to people from different cultures, or reading books, watching movies in different languages, then you will be successful in your language learning. So the fifth one would be, so far in my current list, would be spending a lot of time with the language. Successful language learners spend a lot of time in that language. I want to go back to how I learned Cebuano. Okay. My parents spoke it with each other. They would speak with some of the people around, like most of the house help here would come from provinces that would speak Cebuano. So I would hear it, and it's not like my parents sat me down and said, okay, you need to learn Cebuano. No, it wasn't like Hokkien that you have to speak in Hokkien. Kong na nang oy. That's growing up, that's the phrase that I would always hear. Kong na nang oy. It means speak in Chinese. You have to speak in Hokkien essentially. No, they didn't do that with me. But I spent enough summers in Cebu with my grandparents, my aunt, my uncles, and I lived there essentially for month, at least a month. And if my cousins would come to Manila, I would also hear them. And like I said, the house help would also be most of the time they would be speaking in Cebuano as well. So I did not have to force myself to, unlike today, of course, with Portuguese, Russian, and French, I have to open my laptop or my computer. My laptop or my phone, listen to things on YouTube, on podcast, on Link, Spotify, to be exposed to the language. But with Cebuano, because I lived there, that was enough exposure for me to absorb the language without being without consciously trying to learn it. I just realized that nobody actually taught me Bisaya or Cebuano. It's just I heard it, and I probably asked like, what does this word mean, blah blah blah. But it's not that. It's not like I sat down and scrutinized, like read books in it. Like, no. That's so interesting. I find it so interesting, and at to a certain level, I'm fluent in it. Like, I find myself not needing. I used to need 1 to 2 days in a like Cebu or Bisaya speaking place to refresh my Bisaya, but today I could pick it up if anybody wanted to speak with me in Bisaya or in Cebuano. So that is my so far what I have for what makes a successful language learner. So it's basically, I think, out of the five factors that I have here, the summary would be: successful language learners are interested in the language and have positive experiences with language learning, for whatever reason. So I hope this video helped you determine if you would be a successful language learner. And I hope you start learning other languages. Thanks for watching.